What's going on, Not Move Nation? Welcome to the Not Move podcast. Today is October 13th at 3:02 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm here with Chalky Charbie, and we are going to break down the Monday Night Football games tonight. We have the Buffalo Bills at Atlanta Falcons, and then we have the Chicago Bears at Washington Commanders. First, we'll start with the Buffalo at Atlanta game. Atlanta leads the all-time series 7-6. This game is being played on turf. Buffalo is favored by 4.5 points. The over-under 49.5. Buffalo carries a 4-1 record into this matchup, and Atlanta carries a 2-2 record in this matchup. Injuries, key injuries that I see: Darnell Mooney out, wide receiver for Atlanta. And then Curtis Samuel, wide receiver for Buffalo, questionable. Charbie, I think we were talking about some other injuries, maybe on the defensive side of the ball for Buffalo. I think you said Damar Hamlin is out.
Yeah, safety Damar Hamlin, linebacker Matt Milano, both out. Defensive tackle TJ Sanders is out as well.
All right. Now, both of these pass defenses ranked first and second best in the NFL in yards allowed per game. So, I think this is going to come down to who can run the ball better. But I do give Buffalo a slight passing advantage. They rank 7th in passing yards per game this season. Atlanta ranks 13th, but Atlanta does hold that top spot in passing yards allowed per game, whereas Buffalo ranks 2nd in passing yards allowed per game. Now, and I looked up these statistics before the game on Thursday night. So, anyways, hey, what's going on, Ivan? Glad to see you. Let's go. And then rushing. I don't really see a clear rushing advantage for either team. Buffalo does rank better in rushing yards per game. They rank 2nd. Atlanta ranks 6th best in rushing yards per game. But Buffalo ranks 28th in rushing yards allowed per game. Atlanta ranks 16th. So, this is where both of these defenses are more vulnerable, is the rushing yards allowed. So, one guy, obviously, that I was looking at in this one is Bijan Robinson. Over under 73.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that line in 2 out of 4 games this season. He went over that line in 11 out of 17 games in 2024, and he's never played against Buffalo. My only concern with Bijan Robinson tonight is that in 2024 and in 2023, he averaged more yards per carry on grass than turf. Once again, this game is being played on turf. So I think a guy that I would rather go with in regards to a rushing prop for the Falcons would be Algier. The over-under 30.5 rushing yards. I'd have to lean towards that over there. Algier's gone over that in 2 out of 4 games this season as well. Went over that in 10 out of 17 games in 2024, and he's never played against Buffalo either, but he has averaged more yards per carry on turf than grass in every season that he's played in, and this is his 4th year. So I have to lean with him instead of Robinson in that regard. And then obviously I'm looking at Michael Penix Jr. His over-under on rushing yards is 7.5. Buffalo allows the most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season, but my concern there is that he didn't get over that line at all in 2024, but he has gone over that in 2 out of 4 games this season. I also just want to mention that Buffalo, before the week started, allowed the 9th most rushing yards to running backs. So, I think there are going to be opportunities here for Robinson and Algier, but I got to lean towards Algier going over those 30.5 rushing yards more than Robinson in this game. But here's what I'll say about Robinson. Buffalo ranks 30th in opponent rushing yards per attempt. So teams are getting big gains off of Buffalo when they're running the ball. And Robinson ranks 15th best in the NFL before the week started in rushing yards per attempt. So I could see Robinson breaking out for some runs, long gains in this one. And then Algier ranks 40th in rushing yards per attempt. So I think, both of these guys are in good spots here. And then Charbie, you and I were talking about Josh Allen rushing yards. I would have to lean towards him going over the 34 and a half.
Yeah.
Atlanta hasn't been extremely vulnerable to really anything this season. That I'm really looking at it. Just their whole defense has been pretty solid this year, but this is one of their biggest vulnerabilities, positional defensive vulnerabilities, if not their biggest one. Josh Allen over under 34 and a half rushing yards. He's gone over that in 3 out of 5 games this season, 9 out of 20 in 2024. And then his most recent game against Atlanta, and I believe it was his only career game against Atlanta, he had 81 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So I think, Josh Allen going over those rushing yards tonight, I would have to lean towards him going over that and possibly getting a touchdown. What are you feeling about that, Charbie? Do you think Josh Allen has a decent rushing game, maybe gets into the end zone?
How's Atlanta's pass rush? Is he going to be flushed out of the pocket? Do we know this info yet? If not, we're about to find out.
Well, what I will say is that Atlanta ranks first in passing yards allowed per game. So, what that kind of tells me is that, he may be dropping back, can't find anybody, and take matters into his own hands.
Yeah.
His
34 and a
rushing
half.
uh,
I'm not feeling so strong on the 34 and a half. I can see it's possible, but 9 out of 20 last year, 3 out of 5 this year.
yeah,
I'm undecided.
yeah,
I'm not confident in it personally.
yeah. Ivan says his rushing attempts, alligator, excuse me, over under 7.5. Let's go take a look real quick. I don't necessarily look at rushing attempts, but that doesn't mean that we can't look at it real quick. Let's go check Algier's game log. See how many rushing attempts he's had this year. 10,
Alligators.
16, 10, 16, 1, and 16. So, excuse me. Yeah, that looks pretty solid. Obviously, you could look at rushing attempts allowed by running backs from Buffalo this season. How many times our team is running the ball against Buffalo? Attempts 99 divided by the amount of games that they've played, and then just kind of divvy it up between Algier and Robinson. But let's see, what else do we have here? I don't really see a third down conversion advantage for either of these teams. I do give Buffalo a big red zone conversion advantage, a slight red zone attempts per game advantage, no clear sacks on the quarterback advantage, and no clear turnover differential advantage in this game. I did mention that both of these pass defenses are real good. Atlanta ranks first in passing yards allowed per game. Buffalo ranks second in passing yards allowed per game. The only passing prop, receiving prop that I would kind of be interested in this game would be Bijan Robinson over 4.5 receptions. Looks like that's a weak spot in this Buffalo defense, pass defense, and he's gone over that in 2 out of 4 games this season, but only 4 out of 17 games in 2024. So I'm not really loving it. So personally, I'm just staying away from passing props. I'd be more interested in these rushing props. My favorite ones would be the Algier over 30.5 rushing yards, and then Josh Allen over 34.5 rushing yards, and then probably Penix over the 7.5 rushing yards. But, overall, I think a lot of people are going to be on Buffalo this game. and I don't always fade the public and whatever they're going with, but I am going to in this game. I like Atlanta plus the 4.5. What about you, Charbie? Which way are you leaning? Buffalo to win by 5+ points or no?
I wanted to ask you about that real quick. What I'm looking at here is Buffalo's -3.5. Am I wrong?
Some books could say 3.5. Sure, yeah, yeah.
Okay. If it's 3.5, I'm taking Buffalo to cover,
Hmm.
and I like the over.
The over in this one. I
Give me
don't
that
really,
chop.
guys, I don't really focus too much on over unders. I see it's at 49.5. I guess I would have to probably lean towards the under just because both of these past defenses have been really good. So, but yeah, I've never, really specialized in over under too much. There are times that I do like the over under, but this really isn't one of those games. But what's your final score prediction in this one, Charbie? Did you have any other players that you were looking into for this game?
Mm-mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Drake London's. I like Drake London's receptions. I don't know what they are, but I like them, and I like Drake London's uh receiving yards as well.
Yeah, I could see that, Jarby. I'm looking at Buffalo's receiving yards allowed to running backs, tight ends, and all that stuff. And it seems like after receptions allowed to running backs, their next biggest passing positional defensive vulnerability is receptions allowed to wide receivers and receiving yards allowed to wide receivers. So, yeah, I could see that, man.
Yeah, I think he's going to rely.
What would be your final score prediction in this one, Charby? Over under 49.5. What?
Over. I like the over. I like the over. Buffalo hasn't scored less than 30 points. So if we give them 30, that means Atlanta has to score 20 points to cover the. I like the over. I think it's going to be something like 31-20, something like that.
All right, Buffalo 31-20. So I think that's a pretty solid correct score prediction
Solid.
there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go let's see, I'm seeing Buffalo's favored by 4.5. You're seeing 3.5. Give me Buffalo to win this one by 3. Give me a 30-27 Buffalo win here. 30-27.
I like that as well.
So that would be real high scoring, huh? But yeah, Buffalo, I mean, they've scored 30+ points in 4 out of 5 games this year.
Yeah. I think Buffalo's just kind of, they're just a little bit of an outlier of a team compared to what Atlanta's faced. Josh Allen is just, he has the ability to make plays out of the pocket when he's being rushed, when he's being pressured. He makes things happen, kind of like a Pat Mahomes. So I'm going with his ability to move the chains, make plays, get touchdowns,
Yeah.
basically.
And, I just want to mention if you guys do like James Cook here, I could see him having a good game. Now, before the week started, Atlanta uh, held running backs to the third fewest amount of rushing yards. But I I think I mean, I know that statistic is a little skewed because they were on a bye week in week 5.
Yeah.
So they probably are a little bit more vulnerable to that rushing attack. So if you guys do like James Cook, Atlanta has allowed they rank 23rd in opponent rushing yards per attempt. James Cook ranks 13th best in the NFL before the week started, 13th best in the NFL in rushing yards per attempt. So I could see him picking up some big gains as well.
Hey, something else to note that I'm just seeing is season rushing stats. James Cook. Now, granted, I know Bijan was out for one game, right? So one game's worth of stats are not there for Bijan. But
Mhm.
James Cook has 90 attempts. Bijan's got 64. So that plays a lot into the Algier yards, which I really like too. Also, they're both averaging about 5 yards per attempt. James Cook has 450 rushing yards. Bijan has 314. James Cook 5 touchdowns. Bijan has 1. But this is straight rushing. I'm not looking at receiving as well. And I know Bijan's a big time. So is Cook, but Bijan's a big time receiver too. I think he leads his team in receiving yards, I think.
Wow.
So there's that. That's kind of interesting. So like basically what I'm saying is Cook is cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for those, that are interested, if for those that are interested in, target share, which is a big factor, Bijan ranks 3rd on the Falcons in target share, and he's, he has 1 less target than Kyle Pitts. So Drake London is the leader on that team. So, anyways, any other?
Is he okay?
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on this game, Charbie? Are we good to go to the next game?
Any other thoughts? I think we're good.
All right. Next game, Chicago Bears at Washington Commanders. Washington leads the all-time series 28-25 and 1 against Chicago. The Commanders, since they've changed their name to the Commanders, they are 2-1 against Chicago all-time. Now, these two teams played last season, and I was on the good end of the stick here when Washington threw that Hail Mary. Jaden Daniels. That was a crazy game. But something that I saw is that Chicago played Washington after the bye week last season when that happened, and Chicago is now coming off of their bye week again and playing Washington in this game. This game is being played on grass. And I just want to note, going back to the bye week, the Packers and Steelers were on a bye week last week, and they both won this week. Chicago was on a bye week, and so was Atlanta. Okay, so if the trend continues, Atlanta and Chicago win tonight. But I think I'm going to be going with Washington minus the 5.5 in this game. But let's break it down a little bit. McLaurin out, Washington's wide receiver, and then Noah Brown out, Washington's wide receiver. I just want to dive into these player props real quick because I saw some really interesting things. Okay, so let's start with DeAndre Swift. All right, running back for Chicago. He's played 5 career games against Washington and has a touchdown in each one of those career games. So if you're thinking about Swift, anytime touchdown, you have that working for you. What I was looking at specifically, I think my buddy's phone just – sorry, guys. I think my buddy's phone just died or something. But, DeAndre Swift, 18.5 over under the receiving yards. This seems like one of Washington's biggest defensive vulnerabilities in regards to the pass defense is receiving yards allowed to running backs. His over-under, DeAndre Swift, 18.5 last that I saw. He went over that in 2 out of 4 games this season, 10 out of 17 games in 2024, and then he's gone over that in 3 out of 5 career games against Washington. He ranks 4th on the team in target share. And, I already mentioned that he's scored a touchdown in all 5 career games against Washington, which was pretty cool. I don't see that a whole lot where somebody has 5+ career games against a team and has at least 1 touchdown in every one of those games. Another guy I was looking at was DJ Moore. Now, Washington, before the week started, didn't rank in the top 10 or bottom 10 in receiving yards allowed to wide receivers, but Washington does rank 23rd in passing yards allowed per game. Okay, so I do think that, this is a vulnerability within this defense, and I'm looking at DJ Moore. He's gone over the 39.5 receiving yards in 2 out of 4 games this season, 11 out of 17 in 2024. And then he's gone over that in 4 out of 6 career games against Washington. DJ Moore had a single game career high receiving record of 230 yards against Washington back in 2023. And then he's also had a touchdown, at least 1 touchdown in 3 out of 6 career games against Washington. He ranks 3rd on the team in target share. I know Odunze, they've been really going to Odunze a lot, but I think, this is a good spot for DJ Moore. I think something else that we have to consider with DJ Moore is his rushing capabilities. I did notice that that Washington and Chicago this year have allowed some rushing yardage to wide receivers, but he's only gone over the 6.5 rushing total, DJ Moore, in 5 out of 17 games in 2024 and 2 out of 6 career games against Washington. I think I would lean more towards Debo getting over his rushing yards, and that's set at 7.5. He's gone over that in 3 out of 5 games this season, 9 out of 15 in 2024, and then he's gone over that in 2 out of 3 career games against Chicago. And then, Chicago allows the second most rushing yards per game to opposing teams. So Chicago's rush defense is more vulnerable than Washington's rush defense in regard to yards allowed per game. And I think that the rushing attack may specifically be a bigger factor tonight than on normal nights because of the weather. I'm seeing that there are likely going to be some showers in this game, some gusty winds. I'm seeing on NFLweather.com wind around 14 miles per hour, gusts as high as 25 miles per hour. So, I think the rushing game can be a huge factor in this game, which I have to give Washington a big rushing advantage, okay? So Chicago ranks 24th in rushing yards per game. Washington ranks first. And then in regards to the defense, Washington ranks 17th in rushing yards allowed per game. Chicago allows the second most rushing yards per game to opposing teams. I mentioned this on the show yesterday, and I got to mention it again here today. I think Krosky Merritt on paper is in a great situation here. Now, it's tougher for me to pinpoint player props with rookies because I don't have a ton of data to work with. But what we do know is that Krosky Merritt has gone over the 67.5 rushing yards in 2 out of 5 games this season. But something that I found interesting with this is that Krosky Merritt, before the week started, ranked first in rushing yards per attempt. And no other team allows more rush yards per attempt than Chicago. So I think, Krosky Merritt, just based on that alone, oh, man, I would not be surprised to see him break out for a huge gain, potentially a huge touchdown run. Now, yeah, Jaden Daniels, he's always a threat with his legs, but Chicago has been they've done a good job at defending against quarterback rushing yards this season. Before the week started, they ranked 7th best in rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks. But Chicago, before the week started, allowed the 5th most rushing yards to running backs. So Krosky Merritt, and then who else do they have? They have Chris Rodriguez. I think he could be a sleepy play. Basically, any Washington running back, I think, tonight is worth looking at. But I just can't get over the fact that Krosky Merritt ranks first in yards per carry, and Chicago ranks 32nd last in rushing yards per attempt. I think if I were to have to go with a quarterback's rushing yards in this game, it would definitely be Caleb Williams, because Washington's been more vulnerable to that quarterback rushing, okay? Last that I checked, Caleb Williams over-under on rushing yards was 25.5. He's gone over that in 2 out of 4 games this season. He went over that line in 10 out of 17 games in 2024, and he had 47 rushing yards in his only career game against Washington. So I think, that's a good spot to look at. As far as Chicago's rushing attack, I mean, Washington hasn't been great nor terrible at rushing yards allowed this season. I mentioned this earlier. They ranked 17th in rushing yards allowed per game. And then before the week started, Washington didn't rank in the top 10 or bottom 10 in rushing yards allowed to running backs. So I think, there may be better spots that I would look for with Chicago player props. And maybe one of those props here is going to be, Cole Kmet. I didn't see his receiving line when I looked earlier. Let me see if they have updated it, because I really would like to know his receiving line, because Washington has allowed the 6th most receiving yards to tight ends. Excuse me. I've been talking a lot. Let's see if they have anything here. I'm not seeing anything. But if you guys do see a line on Cole Kmet receiving yards, I think it's worth looking at. And here is why. Washington. I mentioned that Chicago allows the most rushing yards per attempt out of any team this season. Well, Washington allows the most yards per completion. All right. And Kmet ranks 8th best in the entire NFL in receiving yards per catch. Washington is also more vulnerable to the pass than the rushing attack in regards to yards allowed per game relative to the other teams in the league. Also, Cole Kmet has averaged more yards per catch on grass than turf in every season that he's had, except his rookie season in 2020. And then also worth noting, he ranks 5th on the team in target share. Okay. I think that's a decent spot to look at. And then, Caleb Williams passing yards. Yes, Washington's been vulnerable to quarterback passing yards this season. But, Caleb's line is listed at 233.5 last that I checked. He's gone over that in 1 out of 4 games this season, only 5 out of 17 in 2024. And then he went under that in his only career game against Washington. I wouldn't be comfortable going over or under on that line, but I would have to, lean towards the under on that. But man, if Caleb Williams gets the ball in Cole Kmet's hands, Odunze, Burden, and even DJ Moore, these guys can really pick up some yards per catch against that 32nd ranked opponent yards per completion Washington pass defense. Just to give you the rundown, Kmet before the week started ranked 8th in receiving yards per game, or not per game, receiving yards per catch. Odunze ranked 22nd, Burden ranked 31st, DJ Moore ranked 80th. So I think these guys, could pick up some big gains for sure. But as I mentioned, that weather could be a big factor. I would definitely keep my ear out for any severe weather concerns. And then I think Zacchaeus is somebody worth looking at. I don't necessarily love his receiving prop or hate it. It's at 25.5. And believe it or not, he ranks 2nd on the Chicago Bears in target share for some reason. They're throwing him the ball more than DJ Moore this year. But DJ Moore does rank 3rd in that target share. And then Burden, 18.5 receiving yards. He's a rookie, so it's tougher for me to pinpoint those rookie props since I don't have a lot of data to work with. But I would probably lean towards him getting over the 1.5 receptions more than his receiving yards, just because he's gone over that in 2 out of 4 games this season, whereas he's only gone over the 18.5 receiving yards in 1 out of 4 games this season. And then the last guy I'm going to talk about here is Zach Ertz. Before the week started, Chicago allowed the 10th most receptions to tight ends. Zach Ertz has only gone over the 3.5 receptions in 1 out of 5 games this season, though. But he did go over that in 12 out of 20 games in 2024, and 4 out of 6 career games against Chicago. He's gone over that line. So if you're looking for a pass catcher for Washington, that's the way I would lean towards. And really, because and let's go take a look at the target share here for Washington real quick, because the top guy is Debo. And last that I checked with Debo, it looked like he was going to play in this game. Let me just take another look here. I'm looking at the FanDuel Daily Fantasy app. He's technically questionable. But I'm seeing that ultimately his status may not be available and confirmed until about 90 minutes before kickoff. So I think that's big, right? I mean, that's their leader in target share. And if he's out, Zach Ertz is the next man up in regards to target share. And McLaurin's out. So then the next guy would be Jalen Lane, Luke McCaffrey. So that's probably some big news. Definitely some big news with Debo. But one of the big reasons why I'd be a little bit hesitant to go with Washington wide receivers is because before the week started, Chicago allowed the 5th fewest receiving yards to wide receivers and the fewest amount of receptions to wide receivers. But, other than that, I think that about does it for this show. My final score, I like Washington by the 5.5. I think that line will change, though, if Debo is ultimately ruled out of this game. So, I'll probably wait to see that news about Debo. Because if he's in, I think the line will be probably the same. But if he's out, I could see the line drop into Washington minus 4.5, 3.5, something like that. So I think there's, typically what they say is you want to get on favorites early and wait to hit the underdogs. But I think this is a spot where the weight could be more beneficial than jumping on it, just in case Debo's ultimately ruled out. Maybe you guys have better knowledge about Debo's availability than I do. But what I'm seeing here is that he's questionable, and they probably need him. Without him, they're running pretty thin at that wide receiver position already. But I would still like Washington in this game, regardless. But by how much is the question, So I think that about does it. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you guys could hit that subscribe button, we'd really appreciate it. But we just appreciate you guys being here regardless. So no pressure on that, but that would be cool. Good luck tonight, everybody. And I'll see you guys for Thursday night football on Thursday. All right, take care. Good luck.
This non-casual podcast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or reused without the authorized written consent of the Not Move Podcast Network. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.